Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show, and on today's show we have an hour packed with Texas news. Everything with Harris County in Texas we will cover today. And on today's show we have two incredible guests. We have Alexandria Butler, candidate for Congressional District 9, CD9.
That's right.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris.
Good.
Thanks for having me on.
Good.
I love coming over here.
Great. We love having you.
Thanks.
And we have Joe Collins with Young Political Foundation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. It's always a pleasure to see you, Chris.
Good. You want to give a quick description, explanation, shout out to what Young Political Foundation is?
Absolutely. Young Political Foundation is an organization that a colleague of mine came up with, and our primary goal is to identify, train, and support young people running for office. We really believe, and a lot of young people across America believe, that gerontocracy in America has gone too far. Our country is being ran by people who should be in nursing homes right now. They should have been stepped back and allowed young people, or trained their replacements, allow young people to be able to keep our country moving forward with brand new ideas.
Good. Yeah, and
Excellent.
I think we're gonna have a chance to bring that into the debate here on how that's actually an issue in Texas politics and
Yes.
in the driving issues of the state of Texas today. But we have a number of topics we want to cover today. We want to cover banning hemp in the state of Texas. We want to cover Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, his exposure of Chinese infiltration in the Eric Fang Swalwell office. Going a little bit outside of the state of Texas there with that one.
Interesting.
Yeah. We want to talk about the U.S. Supreme Court essentially defending Texas's age verification methods, measures for the adult websites. And we want to talk about Harris County, Houston parents sue the Harris County ISD, the HISD, the Houston Independent School District, over a secret plan to gender transition a student. We want to talk about those things and more. But first thing we're going to start off with is this burning issue in the state of Texas, literally a burning issue, which is banning hemp in the state of Texas. And what's happened is Greg Abbott, this is Greg Abbott and Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick have come down on opposing sides of this issue where Greg Abbott is applying more of a liberal sort of set of methods, ideas for this issue of hemp in Texas, where he's advocating for not a prohibition, but greater regulations on the use of hemp in the state of Texas, whereas Dan Patrick wants an all-out ban. And I'm going to go to Texas Scorecard here, which gives a short little update on it. The article is called "You All Answered, Ban or Regulate THC Products." And in this article, they say that Governor Abbott vetoed legislation that would have banned consumable THC products in Texas, instead calling for stricter regulations. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick argues that regulating these products would require legalizing them first. And then the Texas Scorecard, they polled a number of readers, and all of them came in favor of Dan Patrick's position, in favor of a full-out prohibition on THC consumable products. I'll read just a couple of quotes. Quote, these are readers of the Texas Scorecard. Quote, "Very disappointed in Governor Abbott's veto of the THC bill. He may lose my vote." And that's Houston Fannin. Another one. Quote, "Leave hemp products alone, regulate and tax them just like tobacco and alcohol. Get out of our medical and recreational choices before Texas becomes known as a nanny state." And that is Texan Nina Cruzan. And then one last quote, "THC should be made legal recreationally in Texas, just like Colorado," unquote, Justin Psenik. And, these are really difficult questions because in all areas, in one other topic we're going to talk about today, which is adult websites, there's the question, if we put an age verification blocker on it, does it lead towards a total prohibition of that? And should that happen? With prostitution, it comes up, should it be legalized? Should it be, or would that lead to, greater issues? all of these sort of things are in the web sphere right now, being hotly debated, and this is one more. I don't have the answers, so I'm gonna leave it here to my guests. But so, what do you guys think? Are you with Dan Patrick, or are you with Greg Abbott on this issue? It sounds like Greg Abbott. I do believe that Greg Abbott's methods would lead to a more liberal state, more liberal use of hemp in the state of Texas.
In my opinion, I think you really have to look at what the consumers want. I mean, a lot of times you have guys like Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott, they get into office and they feel like, well, I'm the daddy of this state, so let me tell you what's best for yourself instead of allowing people to be able to have the option to choose what's best for them. When it comes to recreational use, I believe that that's an individual's choice. If you're going to regulate it, then you need to regulate it so it can help rebuild the cities. So you got a lot of dilapidated cities and schools, and I think the revenue from the sale of those type of products can help reinvigorate certain communities. When you talk about the medical aspect of it, I think hemp and THC products really does have a lot of effective use for people like veterans. I'm a veteran myself, and a lot of products they help us, and it's the thing that a lot of people want. I think Dan Patrick, even though you give some of the stats from the scorecard, it's a more older conservative perspective. It's not a perspective of everybody who lives in Texas. But Dan Patrick, in my opinion, it may be popular right now, but maybe he wants to run for governor. Might not be popular for the younger generation who he's going to need that vote.
Right. So I recently read a statistic that millennials make up 140 million individuals in the United States. They are the largest living group of generation of individuals alive. And so what I'm seeing is, number one, a lack of research. Okay. We've got individuals where this hemp, a lot of these hemp products are like a miracle drug for people that suffer from epilepsy. There was a young lady, I read a story, she was having seizures daily and she could not function, she could not work. But I think she just uses the cream, some sort of a cream or salve on her body. It goes in dermally, and she has not had a seizure in 6 months. So they're making great strides using THC products so that individuals that have epilepsy, it can slow down and even stop their seizures. And we're talking grand mal, frontal lobe, different types of seizures. So THC products, to outright ban them, you're also, and to say hemp is banned, right? Hemp isn't even something that can get you high, okay? We use hemp to make rope. We use hemp to make clothing. So when you ban this thing outright, blanket statement, ban it, what you're doing is, without research, you're literally closing off something that could be very fruitful for our country, for our state, for our cities. Just like you said, if we regulate it, the money should be going to cities to build them up and to make our future better. But see, what we're dealing with is individuals who are not visionaries, and they don't know what the younger generation wants or desires. It's not that they don't care, it's just they don't know, but they're moving forward with their ideals and their ideologies. It kind of reminds me of like reefer madness. There was a time when, you know what I'm saying? Like they demonized this thing, but then you have people that are taking opiates every single day that are addicted. And now we have a fentanyl crisis, okay? So what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like with so much misinformation out there, I don't know which way to turn on this because...
Right.
Yeah, reefer madness, right? So they were kind of going the other way. But then at the same time, I sit there and ask myself, is a lot of this information out there that says that that the use of marijuana for medical uses, is it exaggerated? Is it being propagated by the business class? I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I think that the marijuana industry is becoming very lucrative. It's almost, I think I was told, almost $1 billion industry if it hasn't already reached those numbers. And so I think that it's worth visiting. I think the conversation that we're having right now is worth having, no matter where we stand on this issue. I think a lot of older people are going to say no, and side with Dan Patrick. But does this include the younger millennial and the Gen Z who has, gotten their right to vote? They're turning 25 or something now, the Gen Z. So then we've got Generation Alpha coming up. These individuals do not see a problem with marijuana. Even those that don't use it don't see a problem with it and know about the health benefits. And so I think that we should have the conversation. We should visit this. We need to do research before we just get behind a mic and start speaking, say, no, just no.
I mean, I don't know how far it's going to go, but I do agree that the idea that this one, like, if you follow Greg Abbott's methods, his ideas, that it will liberate it more, and that means that we will see people in open air settings smoking a doobie. And I still like cringe at that. I was watching these MMA fighters that I really respect this week in a podcast, and they pulled out a doobie and started smoking it, and it just reminded me of the 1970s, right, when the high school kids were all doing that. And I lost a little bit of respect for him. And I'm not saying that's right. I don't know what the answer is, but ultimately, like, we are eventually going to see, you're going to be at a diner with your family, and someone next to you is going to pull out a doobie and start smoking.
Well, that's when these types of private businesses, they have to make rules. I mean, they've got rules now. I mean, I'm seeing people all the time smoking a blunt or a doobie, and it's not legal. Right? I smell weed everywhere in the city, right? And so that's where it comes to these businesses. If you're coming smelling like marijuana, you can't come in here and eat. You can't dine.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it has to be. I mean, because that's what we don't want Texas to be like Colorado. Colorado doesn't just have marijuana legal. They have ketamine legal. They have mushrooms that are legal. So you can go there. It's like one-stop shopping at their dispensary. You can get all of these things, right? But we're recreational use and medicinal use, two different things, right? I'm with compassionate care. I'm totally for that. I know personally, I have friends that have cancer and have had cancer, could not eat unless they were, they had either partaken and I think there's a pill, a THC pill, but it doesn't work the same. And so what they were doing was either eating it like in a brownie or a cookie or something like that, like an edible is what they call it. So I truly believe in medicinal marijuana. Like, I'm just going to put that out there. I do believe in that.
I'm not questioning that, and I'm saying I don't have an answer.
Right. What is the right
But, like,
answer?
okay, for example, the one thing I always think about is I sort of think about a couple of historical events. So if you look at the Prohibition, absolutely bad set of ideas that created an underclass movement that was dark and criminal, and
Absolutely.
the laws itself created a criminal environment, and it just led to more corruption of public officials,
Absolutely.
and then that criminal class began to begin trafficking high-end drugs.
Right.
It always creates a criminal class. So that's the
true.
one argument. And right now, I mean, I'm glad that prohibition's over. I think that we do accentuate alcohol so much. Like, for example, in all of our country musics, they talk about whiskey. 7 days a week, drink a whiskey, me and my whiskey. Like,
Right.
It's like they carry the whiskey in their Bible,
Yes.
two completely different things, but they put them both in. And that's propaganda.
See, alcohol
Okay.
lobbyists this is probably something that they're fighting as well. They probably don't want this legalization to happen because that means people are going to drink less alcohol. I mean, that might be an issue,
Yeah.
because Texas there's a lot of alcohol distributors, and I'm not against, alcohol. I think with moderation, as long as people have control and temperance,
Yeah.
that's the thing that we're talking about there. But alcohol kills a lot of people.
Yeah. I'm not questioning that THC has medical benefits. I think it probably does. I remember Ricky, the football player for
Ricky Williams.
Ricky Williams, and he told a story. Well, he might have turned into a pothead, man. I don't know, but
He did.
okay. But think about what he said. He said he was strict and straight. He was at Texas. He was stressed with his freshman season at University of Texas Longhorns, and he was not performing on the game. Someone handed him a doobie. He smoked that thing, and he turned into just an incredible running back. He just won game after another. And whatever cobwebs were in his head that were stopping him from performing were alleviated from the use of marijuana. So I don't know. I don't have
It does
answers.
have its benefits, but it does have its, just like with any other medicine, it has its side effects, And so you have to take all of those things in perspective. We can't just, put a blanket statement on it. But like I said, I think medicinally, it should be spoken about a little bit more because there are people that suffer from pain that would rather use marijuana than opiates. Opiates are highly addicting, and they keep people trapped in a bondage, And so what we want to see is more, people, we don't want to see people in pain at all, right? But we know that there are chronic pain sufferers. And so is it less addicting to go this route, right? Is it less burden on the family to go that route? It stinks, but I mean,
Well, I'll play devil's advocate on this. If we get
Excellent.
rid of marijuana and THC products, I think we need to get rid of tobacco products.
ooh,
Tobacco causes cancer. It's a known fact that tobacco causes cancer,
Ooh.
and cigarettes are extremely addictive.
Yes.
Cigarettes stink.
Vapes.
Cigarettes have no medicinal purposes.
Yeah,
They don't
I mean,
heal anybody.
I think you bring a good point, because I just read an article this week about how the state began advocating for, through our government, they began advocating for the proper awareness and knowledge of tobacco products. So when my parents were kids, thank goodness we weren't born in that generation. My dad started smoking cigarettes at, I don't know, 14 years old. My mom at 17 years old.
that's pretty normal.
They both died from it. My dad stopped smoking at like 50, and it still got him.
It still kill you.
Right? But think about what they had. They smoking cigarettes. Literally, John Travolta in Grease was on the track and field running sprints and smoking a cigarette afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean,
My
they had
husband
the
told me-
NFL players going out throwing Super Bowl touchdown passes and smoking a cig on the sidelines.
Right.
I mean, it's like drinking Gatorade or something. That was propaganda.
But it
So
was everywhere.
There was no counter argument. Everything we
Right.
were told.
It
But
was
now,
everywhere.
right, what happened? We lost an entire class of people.
Yeah.
Right? We all lost loved ones.
Yes.
And but through that, we got proper education. I don't think it needs to be illegal at this point, but I understand where you're coming from.
That is an excellent point that you made with the tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
And then vapes have become so popular as well. But now we're having an argument about THC.
Right.
Vapes are killing people in 5 years.
They're killing kids.
They're giving them popcorn lungs, And we're talking about the dangers of THC, but vapes probably should be front and center right now.
Should. I think a lot of times and this goes back to my point earlier about gerontocracy. The politicians are so old, they're out of touch with
Out of touch.
anything that's going on that's going to be able to move our country forward, or anything that consumers actually want that they've done the research on.
That's
I'm
very
pretty sure
true.
Dan Patrick doesn't know anything about marijuana and marijuana products, hemp products, THC products, nothing like that. He's just an old white guy who's a Republican with his semi-conservative values.
Okay, we'll move to a new subject.
That's a good subject, though.
Yeah,
we could
it's
talk all
excellent.
day
This
about
one's
that.
sort of related down the same line. U.S. Supreme Court upholds Texas age verification law for online porn sites. And in this instance, of course, with the click of a button, our children can be exposed to images of any sort, any type. And so what the state of Texas did, which I consider to be the most rudimentary of measures, they simply they required that porn sites put a age verification blocker where you simply go on, click that your age, and then you can enter the site. And what happened is that the porn companies, they attacked the state of Texas.
Wow.
Legally and with propaganda and all this stuff, and they're attempting to make the same argument that somehow this is beneficial for our kids, but largely their argument is that it's a measure against free speech, that the porn companies putting out these images, these graphic images, and oh whoops, kids get to see them too. That if they're prevented in any way, shape, or form, it's a measure against free speech. And that if you go down this road, it's going to be a totalitarian state where you can't speak your mind and all of this stuff.
Wow.
And what happened is there was actually a federal judge that came and argued and ruled in favor of the adult websites and said that it was a violation of free speech and they should be allowed to continue to propagate these images. But the U.S. Supreme Court upholds Texas age verification law for online porn sites.
Amen.
Justice Clarence Thomas delivered the 6-3 opinion, finding that the state's age verification law does not unconstitutionally burden First Amendment protected free speech.
Absolutely.
The law one second, guys. I want to find who voted against it. I'm going to give you guys the ones. 1 second, guys. I can't find it now. But this free speech, this law was largely, the quarterback of it was Ken Paxton. He's the one that's been really supporting, pushing, promoting this thing. Justices Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented.
Typical.
Of course.
So those three dissented.
Of course. they did.
Remember, Ketanji Brown Jackson could not answer what is a woman.
Yes.
How is this woman on the Supreme Court? Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton called the ruling, quote, a major victory for children, parents, and the ability of states to protect minors from the damaging effects of online pornography. Quote, companies have no right to expose children to pornography and must institute reasonable age verification measures. I will continue to enforce the law against any organization that refuses to take the necessary steps to protect minors from explicit materials, unquote. That is your Attorney General, Ken Paxton. With that being said, tell me what you guys think.
I'm not surprised at all that those ladies voted the way they did. They are part of this sick agenda to groom our children and to over-sexualize them and hypersexualize them. This is a leftist agenda, whether they agree or whatever, but they're okay with demonic and disgusting books being in children's libraries and their schools. They're okay with children being able to access pornography. Children at a younger age now have tablets, have access to phones, and oops, they accidentally see a picture that literally ingrains itself in their mind and something that they can't get out of their mind, and then something builds upon that. It's a root that's being put into these kids' head. And so, you know, these individuals, and I'm seeing it more and more, they do not want to protect the children. They want to damage children. I was molested at the age of 4. And so when that kind of imprint on a child is absolutely evil, and it changes their entire trajectory in life, I just don't agree.
I think that this really relates to the last conversation where we're trying to find the delicate balance of where the laws should lay,
Right.
where people are protected versus where we go too far
Right.
and prohibitions that are unnecessary step in.
Right.
But my point being
Yes.
is that let's put the children to the side for the second.
Right.
Let's just talk about adults. These images are available with a simple point and click of a button, right?
Okay.
The most beautiful people doing those acts
Right.
with the point of a click.
Right.
They're available to us. And people are consuming this every day. Now, first of all, you've got it coming through the websites, but then
Right.
on top of it, our Super Bowl halftime shows
Yeah.
are essentially striptease dancing,
Yeah.
right? It's coming at us at all ends constantly. You're scrolling through Facebook, and what do you know? There is a bikini in your face. Just she
It's
happens
everywhere.
to be cooking eggs for breakfast or whatever.
Right.
It's just constantly
everywhere.
being brought at us. And what happens is I think it puts everyday people in sort of a just a state of hunger. I don't know what the word is.
Right.
But I think it's too much.
It is.
And it's everywhere. And I think that it needs to be pulled back. I think this age verification law is nothing.
It's barely.
It's nothing. It's not even close to what we need.
Right.
I'll talk about what I think some of the solutions I think could be. But what do you think, man?
I agree. We got to protect the children. The only constitutional provisions for children are for us to protect them.
Right.
They don't like you said. We're in a culture where children are being hypersexualized, and if you want to destroy a country, you
Start with the children.
introduce sex,
Right.
and you get everybody focused on sex, and makes it easy for other influences to come in and take over your entire country. So, I mean, I think this is a win for Ken Paxton. I mean, he's not my favorite, but I think this is great. You have to submit your personal identifiable information to ensure that you're over the age of 18 before you can consume that information. Look at what's going on in the schools. I mean, the Supreme Court literally had to put down a decision that says you have these books, and in my opinion, it'll be considered pornographic books in our schools, but they consider it LGBTQIA. And the Supreme Court had to lay a rudimentary decision that says, you know what? Parents should be able to opt their children out of being able to see this stuff or have classes where this stuff is taught in schools. Protecting the kids, it has to be the number one priority. Now, adults, I mean, if you're a consumer,
This
that's
is
your
where I
idea.
think we as adults, because of the lack of temperance, because of the lack of self-control, right? Because of this lack, this is where this fine line comes in. It's like, is it my job to parent other adults, and keep them from being exposed to something that's out there that they're going to do anyway? Or, how do we stop this at different ports of entry, so to speak, where we can control that and regulate it? So the age verification is like a barely thing. Credit card maybe should be
That's what I think.
required.
Because basically, like, here's what the porn companies are saying. They're saying, look, you're requiring that the viewers submit their personal information,
Yes.
right? And nobody wants to do that. Okay, but a very simple measure would be put it behind a paywall.
Right.
It should be required to be put behind a credit
Period.
card. I don't think you can ever attain 100% perfection with any law.
Right.
But I think if you put it behind a credit card, that you are going to have just a tiny margin of error. I think you're going to largely protect the children.
Yes.
And I think at the same time, it should be completely forbidden that any images are available on the website that are
Right.
pornographic in nature. They should all be behind in other words, you
Yes.
can't put a simple search engine up with images.
I agree.
And pull up whatever images. All images should be eradicated from the internet unless they're behind a paywall of that nature.
I agree with that because what that does, it stops the flow and keeps it from being so easily accessible. But I think that it probably should go one step further. If people are wanting to put these images out there where children could possibly reach them, there should probably be harsher penalties for that, just for the simple fact that, to me, it's nothing as an adult if I'm lusting, right? And this is what I'm doing. I'm not into porn or anything like that, but if I was, I would not have a problem with it being behind a paywall because I understand as an adult that there could be children, right, that might view this. And so this is responsible to me. That's how I would feel. I can't speak for everybody else, right? But this is where parents have to take their authority back in their homes. They have to have authority over their children. They have to know what their children are doing. The nanny state shouldn't be going on, but nanny home, where you know what your kids are doing and viewing, that's also of vital importance. We can't just pass laws because parents might not be, they might not know what their children are doing.
That would sound good 10, 15 years ago when the cost of living wasn't so high, but parents are not
I know,
parenting
they gotta
kids
work.
anymore. Yeah, they're completely out of the home 24/7.
Well, we say that I was a latchkey kid, right? I grew up, most of my generation, and our generation grew up with parents. It's not that we were neglected, but we were. But our parents worked. I came home, I had a key around my neck. I was home alone. I made dinner. I made all kind of stuff for myself. I raised myself my whole life. I've been doing that since I was 4 years old, and so, parents work. We have to understand that too, but there wasn't that technology available to me
Exactly.
then. I had to read books and I had to have an Encyclopedia Britannica. So times have changed with this technology stuff. So what do we do?
Yeah, well, I think the other tactic that this pro-sex movement, whether they're coming from our academia or from these adult website companies,
Right.
they put it on the parents. They're like,
Right.
oh, you can just opt out. They do that with the schools, the books in the schools.
Yeah.
You can just opt out.
Right.
So in other words, the default position is we're going to expose your kids to this until you can opt out.
Get your kids out of our
Right.
schools.
While our parents that's a tactic.
Yeah, it's a tactic.
Because the parents are working 80-hour weeks, they
Right.
don't have time. So why isn't the default position in the favor of the parents? No. The default position is the stuff is prohibited from my child's eyes.
Right.
And oh, by the way, you have no option of and you have no option
Right.
in this
Right.
in this conversation. The default position should be in favor of the parents.
Right. It's also, when kids see this stuff, it's a form of molestation.
Yeah, it is.
It may not be physically happening, but it's happening.
I think the chances of kids viewing this stuff is just so incredibly high.
It is.
Because again, it's at you just pull up a halftime show and it's a stripper dance.
Right.
Well, if you go to California or New York, they got it all in the streets.
Yeah.
San Francisco, gay pride, Los Angeles, drag queen story hours, New York City. You have the body positive pride parades. and
It's
stuff
everywhere.
like that too. It's literally.
All right, I got a
over
good
the
one for
place.
you guys here.
It's everywhere.
Texas scorecard. Houston parents sue HISD over daughter's secret social gender transition. So what these teachers were doing, I believe it was about 6 teachers, and I believe it was in Belair High School.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Parents of a Belair High School student filed a federal lawsuit against the HISD, Houston Independent School District, earlier this week, alleging the school socially transitioned their daughter against their explicit wishes. The lawsuit names several individuals, including Superintendent Mike Miles,
Excellent.
Belair High School Principal Michael Nigley, School Counselor Sarah Ray, and multiple teachers. Okay, so what they were doing in this is it's a daughter, it's a biological female,
It's a female.
and these teachers were referring to it
Masculine.
as a he.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
I know all about
That
this.
is manipulation.
It absolutely-
They are
it's grooming.
setting that child up for the full mutilation of the genitalia.
Yes, they absolutely are. I went through this. I think the very first show I've been on your show, Chris. We were talking about VOCA legislation,
Right.
And I mentioned I have a daughter. When we were back in Kansas, this very same thing happened, and now my child is on testosterone, has a full beard, has a mustache, all of these things that were going on, behind my back through the school, acknowledging this thing that at home you're not allowed to. We're not on that. We're on your school. We're on your personal problems, but changing your gender is impossible. And but at school they're referring to my daughter Amari as Mar. And a male, and you're a boy, and you're this. I wish I had been able to sue because I think it's right. Personally, it stops them from this.
They're losing this war because no parent wants their kid exposed to these sick sexualized ideas.
Right.
And so what they're doing is they're adopting more nefarious under the radar tactics.
Right.
And VOCA is one of them. And,
Yes.
This is so similar to the VOCA. I would
It
like
is.
to point out, it was the school counselor, Sarah Ray, that was named in this lawsuit.
Right.
So in other words, the first idea that I get is, and I don't know if this is the case, but it seems to me that this counselor was referring to this child as the opposite gender.
Right. That's where it starts because they go to the counselor because, at home my mom's too religious. She says I can't do this. I can't change my gender. But what do you think? And they're all like, we'll be there for you. What do you prefer to go by? Oh, this new name. Oh, that other name is your dead name. They're the ones that are helping these kids stay with this transition stuff.
We made that an issue. This show specifically made that an
Yes.
issue in the Fort Bend Independent School District School Board race. We made VOCA an issue, and it was expected
Yes.
that we would be quiet about that. Before, I had a manila folder handed to me, and it said VOCA on it. I'm like, what is this? And over the course of 6 weeks, we dissected VOCA until we could get it to an easy to understand issue for the parents to decide
Right.
going into the school board race.
Right.
Julie Pickren, who's on the State Board of Education, took the issue to President Trump.
Did.
And thank you, Julie.
Yes.
Okay?
Thank
so
you.
now President Trump knows about VOCA because of the Fort Bend Independent School District race, and we were told to keep quiet about
Right.
it. We were told that by Republicans.
Yes, they did.
Why? Why do Republicans want VOCA to be kept quiet?
I went to a candidate forum and they came against me, but I stood strong because I let them know that a lot of these bills are so vague. They're just, the wording is so vague that in the future, progressives, leftists, whatever you want to call them, they will reinterpret these things to mean something else. Now, VOCA, it sounds like a good thing on the surface, right? Victims of crime, right? So, but the crime could be my mom's religious. The crime could be, this is a hate crime because she doesn't honor my gender transition, right? So that's why, even though it sounds like a good thing and it was meant for kids who are being physically abused, neglected, whatever, it turned into something else. Because now abuse is this broad term. Now you're abusing your kid if you don't agree with their gender transition.
Joe, what VOCA is this, right? Your child gets assaulted, gets robbed, gets mugged. And what you do is the school comes to you and says, hey, we have these counseling that's all paid for.
Right, all paid
and
for.
And of course you're going to hand your kid. Yeah, please, I want my
Help
kid.
them.
Any parent would do that. But then when you come back and say, hey, I'd like to get an update on the counseling, they say, no, that's confidential.
Right.
That's confidential. That it's off limits.
Right.
Okay. So now you're no longer cut off from whatever therapies are being given to your child.
Right.
And it possibly even includes hormonal therapies.
That's what happened with my
medical
daughter.
therapies.
Yes.
What is your opinion on that?
I believe the unpopular truth is parents give the schools and the school districts too much authority over their children.
Thank you.
Sometimes you have to stipulate what you want your children to have and what you don't want your children to have. Personally, I would never give any institution that much authority or power over my own kids. And also, I think a lot of people, they would stop that if the liability falls back on the schools, the school district, and the superintendent, and as well as the school board. I think a little bit upwards of 80% of every young person who transition ends up committing suicide.
Right.
Nobody ever addresses that issue,
Right.
but they commit suicide because when they get older, they find out that the decisions that they made were not the right decisions.
That's right.
You got to understand the frontal lobe and the cerebral cortex of an individual is not fully developed until they're about 23 to 25. I could be wrong,
No, you're right.
but around 23, 25,
Yes.
that's when it's fully developed, when you can make the decision to be able to transition. As a child, I think it's always a bad decision. However, when that child commits suicide, and studies show that it's going to happen,
Right.
the liability of that child needs to fall back on whoever participated in the transition surgery of that individual.
Okay, so we're going to talk
Excellent.
more about the specifics of this HISD case, but because it is a slight difference than VOCA, but it's all down the same line. But here's
It
my
is.
question for you, right? Let's put the sexual transition to the side.
Yes.
Let's put the sexuality to the side.
Yes.
You take your child to a counselor for counseling, and then you're told it's confidential, you're cut off. It is only reasonable. There is such an anti-parent sentiment in our schools today.
Absolutely.
Of course, it is only reasonable to think that counselor, the first thing they're going to do is say, "What about the parents?"
Right.
They're going to put the spotlight on the parents,
Right.
and of course a child's going to express some frustration with parents because parents discipline their kids.
Right. Absolutely.
So what the school does at that point is they make the parent the bad
guy.
So I don't give a gosh darn. Of course, I give a gosh darn about the sexualization of the kids, but to put that to the side, that you are handing your child off to someone that has a political agenda against you for
Right.
confidential counseling sessions.
Right.
It can go in a myriad of ways
It can.
outside of the sexual issue.
Yes.
How can Fort Bend County Republicans defend that?
What are you signing when you enroll your child? What are you signing? You're handing over authority to these kids. If an active shooter happens in your school, you're not allowed to go up and get your kid. You're not allowed to basically even interact with your kid. You're not allowed to do anything. Your hands are tied. The school has possession of your kids for 8 hours a day. So that's something, I don't think the problem was corrected with school choice. I think parents really need to decide, when you're putting your kid in school, like you said, put all that other stuff to the side. What are you handing your kids over to? And when you are tying your own hands and you're saying this school now has authority over my kid, what are you signing up for? Are you happy with the direction?
I think Joe's point is very important.
I agree.
Because at this point in time, parents need to be more critical. They need
Yes.
to be more questioning
Yes.
and more cynical when it comes
Absolutely.
to meeting with these school counselors.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let me read some more here. Okay, here's what happened in this situation in HISD. In HISD, the situation began in 9th grade when the student's theater teacher distributed a worksheet asking for students' names and pronouns. Typically, the arts are highly Marxist.
Absolutely.
And Marxism is a concerted effort against the family, so it's not surprising this
Absolutely.
came from a theater teacher. Okay.
Not at all.
Sarah Osborne, who was the school counselor, specifically requested that the teacher uses her daughter's legal name and female pronouns. However, the student altered the worksheet, crossing out the original entry and writing in the, quote, he, him pronouns. Okay, so we see Sarah Osborne made the right move there, so maybe we got that issue of her in this lawsuit wrong. That'll all play out hopefully in the events. But how the student altered the worksheet, crossing out the original entry and writing in he, him pronouns. The parents claim that they did not learn about the consistent use of male pronouns by teachers until the student was well into her sophomore year. At that point, they formally requested that the teachers revert to using their daughter's biological pronouns. Despite these requests, the lawsuit alleges that the teachers continued using the male pronouns. And it goes on to tell this horrific story. So I think that makes your point.
It does.
Alexandria, that
And who told,
This is
she
mental
might
manipulation.
not have done that on her own, but she might have, because, we know kids can be rebellious sometimes, but somebody might have said, let's wipe this out, because these teachers oftentimes cross boundaries with these students because they want to be their friend, right? They want to get along. And so it could have been a teacher even saying, let's just wipe this out. Your parents don't have to know. But when the line was crossed after the parent comes to the school, tells you face to face, you will call my child by the name I've given them at birth, that's when you have to say, hey, look, I spoke with your mom. She's not okay with this. So I have to call you by your name. I'm not going to lose my job over this. And the kid has to understand that. Let your friends call you by your little name, but as far as the teachers, they need to be with the parents.
Unpopular opinion. We didn't have this issue before Barack Obama got in
Come
office.
on now. Oh.
And another thing is when it's glamorized by Michelle Obama with Dwayne Wade's son, Zaire, who allegedly transitioned to a woman because the little boy was gay. She literally got on a public stage and said, "You're the bravest little girl I know." And now you see every black liberal woman or every white liberal woman supporting this type of stuff. And I think it's pure idiocracy, from the celebrities all the way down to the modern activists in the streets. I went to an event in Plano and I saw these. It was a Democrat event. And you have the liberals who are talking about, yeah, we got to support, our transitioning children. And I was like, transitioning children, that sounds like a mental illness.
Right.
When I was a recruiter for the military, we didn't even allow people to come into the military who felt that they was the opposite gender. They call that gender dysphoria. And that was a mental illness.
It's in the DSM.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to switch to the next subject. It all kind of goes together. Okay, so Texas GOP chairman warns Trump against backing quote unquote fake Republicans. Okay, and so, I know exactly how we're going to talk about this because it actually relates to our last conversation. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Victor Perez, by the way, I want to jump back to that last conversation. Victor Perez in the Katy ISD school board.
Yes.
What he did was he made a rule that would eliminate all of the sexual content, all of this sort of sexualized agenda from the school, right? And I'm just trying to say that, like, I'm thinking back about that last article and how, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around.
You're fine.
I'm thinking back about that last article and how he actually did the right thing in that situation. But okay, sorry. Texas GOP chairman warns Trump against backing fake Republicans. Abraham George, who is the Texas GOP chairman, says the battle is about defining the future of the Republican Party in Texas and nationwide. And essentially, I know why I brought up. Okay, so what's happening is the Republicans are largely winning. They're largely winning in sentiment across America. Okay, this sick sexualized agenda by the Democrats is causing that party to die on a vine.
Right.
But Democrats know how to fight. Democrats know how to win. So they adopt more Luciferian tactics,
Yes.
more under the radar serpentine tactics.
Yes.
And one of the things that they do is they will go into a primary. They'll take a candidate who's a husband, a father, a Christian, and then what he does is he goes in and he votes in a Republican primary, and then he broadcasts to everybody he's a Republican when he's really a Democrat.
Right.
Why did I bring up Victor Perez? Because James Cross, who is the Katy ISD superintendent, he did that. He did that exact thing. Okay, so let me jump back for a second. Victor Perez was the Katy ISD superintendent,
Yes.
and he took a strong stance against the sexualized agenda of the children in the schools. When
Yes.
you do that, you step into the crosshairs of the demonic left.
Yes.
So they went after him with everything that they had. They spent every ounce of ammunition that they had on Victor Cross. He was enemy number one in Katy ISD. And what happened, again, and it was largely done by these teachers, right?
Right.
So here's Victor Perez bringing a pro-parents agenda to Katy ISD, and the teachers, along with the Rhino Republicans,
Right.
mount an effort against Victor Perez.
Right.
And these are the teachers who, like in Bel Air High School, who want this sexualized agenda on the children.
Right.
Okay, why do they want that? They want it because they have a sentiment against the parent.
Right. It's against
They
America.
report to the parents and they don't like it.
Right.
So they have an anti-parent sentiment. So they're taking political shots against parents, and the child is the most precious thing in a parent's life.
Yes.
And the teachers have a large influence over that child, so they're using that influence for political reasons. This is very wrong. Victor Perez did that. So what did the teachers do? James Cross registers in a Republican primary, and then he runs against Victor Perez, and they spend every ounce of ammunition they have, and they win, and they take out Victor Perez.
Right.
So as a result of that, Abraham George, who is the Republican GOP chairman for the state of Texas, has launched an effort to close our primaries, to stop this nefarious, under-the-radar effort to steal our elections from us, okay? So what does that mean? It means that the primaries are closed. In other words, you had to be voting Republican in order to vote for the primary. You can't just you have to be a registered Republican to vote in the primary.
Right.
You can't just show up and vote in a Republican primary and then, like James Cross, say, oh, I'm a Republican now. By the way, it should be noted that as soon as James Cross got into office, the first thing he did is he brought back the sexualized agenda in Katy ISD. Okay? So it's a rude awakening for the parents in Katy, Texas. But the point being, okay, so Abraham George comes out and he comes for closed primaries. But here's the issue with closed primaries. Okay, President Donald Trump chimes in. He's like, you shouldn't do that.
Right.
Well, I understand Abraham George's point. He's like, bud, stay out of state issues. You're not in Texas. We appreciate you, but stay in your space. But the point that I think is very legitimate is that we're in a period where there are a lot of minorities who are red pilling. They are typically Democrats. They're not registered Republicans, but they're finding this Republican sentiment that is a pro-family, pro-liberty,
Yes.
pro-life sentiment, and they
Yes.
are identifying with it.
Yes.
And so they want to vote in that primary. And a lot of them, and at the same time, a lot of them are putting their name in the primary to run for office.
Right.
And the issue is that if you close off the primaries, then those people can't vote in the primaries and they can't have a say. And what that does is that protects the old guard establishment rhino Republicans.
And the Democrats.
Who I consider to be a bigger problem than the Democrats. Because the Democrats, at least they have the honesty of wearing their positions on their sleeve, whereas these Republicans will lie, cheat, and steal.
Yes.
And win that election and then put it in the Democrat agenda. And so that's this issue in a nutshell, burning across the state of Texas. What do you guys think?
You want to go ahead?
I know Abraham George, and I think he's a smart man. I agree with the sentiment that the president of the United States should focus on federal elections and stay out of state issues. However, from my experience as a Black Republican, and I'm from the inner city, when you have a large number of minorities wanting to come into the Republican Party, one of the biggest issues is we're not embraced. We don't get an opportunity to have a voice or get an opportunity to run for office without being able to conform with the policies or the political positions of the party. The majority of the time, the political position of the party is so out of touch with what's going on in reality that it's ridiculous. In Texas, in order to win, you got to be married, you got to have kids, and you got to do all of these things. Well, the majority of young people are not married like the majority of older people are. And so I think that when you cross hairs with these issues, you're going to have a huge problem. Now, as far as rhinos being in office, like I said before, I mean, like America has a serious gerontocracy issue in general. The biggest voting population are the older people. The older people are out of touch with the young people. The young people don't want to vote because they don't even like the old people in office. However, we don't even have any viable options.
I mean, I grow older by the day, so I take a position that supports the geriatrics. I mean, for me, there is no man that could save the country like President Donald Trump, who is old as the hills.
Right. But he's not politically old.
And he's also,
okay,
he relates
when I-
to the younger
Okay,
generation.
When I
Sentiment.
ran against Maxine Waters in South Los Angeles, and people say, "How can you be a Republican?" Well, because I'm from South Los Angeles.
Right.
And the only common denominator between the failure and success of a place is a person who's been in office
That's
for
right.
that period of time. Maxine Waters been in office from Assembly to Congress since 1976.
Right.
They didn't even have
Your
like
point-
cell
your
phones.
point is very well made. I totally agree with that position. Because what Donald Trump did in the 2016 election, and I don't want to go there with this conversation, but what he did is unheard of. Running a campaign is so hard, and he did it. He won the national level. And yeah, everything is done to further entrench these rhinos my issue's bigger with the rhinos than the toxic lefties, but everything's done to entrench that family, that cartel in office. What do you think?
Well, I agree with what you guys were saying regarding the closed elections. I don't agree. I do agree with the sentiment, like you said, because I like Abraham George. I
like him too. I have no problem. I like President Donald Trump.
Right. I mean, but we don't have to agree with
Right.
everything, just because we like somebody. See, like, for instance, my district, CD9, right? This district is 37% Hispanic, 37 to 38% Hispanic, about roughly 32% Black, okay? And then the rest are white and other, right? So I'm dealing with individuals that are typically not energized to vote for a Republican, and I'm running as one in this district. And so with an open election, it actually opens me up when I do my canvassing, when I'm talking to individuals, and we've already been speaking with a lot of people through UCA, Urban Conservatives of America, so we've been talking to people. And so it helps to have the open election, because when we're explaining to them our position, when we're talking face-to-face with individuals, it's like they are in this space where it's like, I want to vote for you, but I don't want to be a Republican, because everything they know about the Republican Party is negative. They think it's a lot of racism, a lot of old white men, a lot of this, a lot of that. Basically, the sentiment of, what's the word you use?
Gerontocracy.
Gerontocracy. That's absolutely it. They say these things face to face. They're like, I agree with everything you're saying, but I don't want to be a Republican. Well, good news is that you don't have to become a Republican. You just have to align with my plan, and you can vote for me in this election. That opens me up to run as a Republican in these Democratic strongholds that many Republicans themselves told me not to do. Oh, that's a Democrat thing. This is why this seat goes uncontested. This is why, is because they want to close things off and say, don't run, don't do this, but secretly flip Houston red. That makes no sense.
I don't agree with a lot of things that California did, but California made their elections, their open election, and it's the top two vote getters, irrespective of the political party. And it actually forces candidates to compete with other candidates in both political parties. So with that, even though California is a heavy Democrat state, yes, as a Democrat and as a Republican, you have to actually go out and you have to compete. And the person who works the hardest, aside from all the
other foolishness,
the issues that they got in California, you can actually win. I think that will work here in Texas.
I agree.
You have to appeal to a base that's outside of what you're comfortable with.
Here's the other thing, real quick, is that typically in Democrat strongholds, they don't ever see a Republican. Like, when I'm coming out there into the 3rd Ward, they're like, "You're a Republican? You're out? You're not afraid to be here?" I'm like, "Y'all my people. What are you talking about?" And then it's like, I like her, They don't typically vote Republican, ever. Some of them don't typically vote. We're talking about maybe 5% come out to vote in a local election. So it causes you to work harder and to earn that vote from people who typically don't vote your direction.
All right, guys, I want to go to possibly the last issue, and this is a Texas scorecard. Harris County agencies reportedly spent millions with no paper trail. So there's been an ongoing issue with Harris County departments. Their executives are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, yes, and they're spending our dollars in the millions, yes, with no accountability. And this goes on to say, last year, the engineering department, one second here, the Toll Road Authority, the engineering department, and the flood control district had procurement issues. They spent millions of dollars without following a procurement process or maintaining a paper trail. They have been plagued with procurement issues. Issues with the Harris County Toll Road Authority, the Engineering Department, and the Flood Control District have been known since a 2024 audit. Transparency has become a significant concern in the implementation of the flood bond. Dozens of community advocates attending the meetings alleged that the Flood Control District failed to keep residents informed about project plans and spending. Mm-hmm. What Lena Hidalgo wants to do is she wants to take it so that, let me see here, and let's see here. The 2024 audit found that Harris County departments, including the Toll Road Authority, the Engineering Department, and the Flood Control District, maintained limited documentation on how vendors were chosen and often lacked a conflict of interest in disclosures.
Yep.
Some deficiencies dated back to 1977. Auditors found no paper trail for many contract awards, including missing bid evaluations and selection committee records. And here in Hidalgo, Lena Hidalgo, in response to the audit, she wants to overhaul the system. She urged the county's 4 commissioners to relinquish their authority to award contracts to a central purchasing department. So what Lena Hidalgo, what Lena Hidalgo wants to do, her answer is, okay, we'll just have one person take over this. They always, they create the issue, and the issue always seems to bounce in the ball of their favor, right? So the way I view her response is that if you get, a table on 4 legs stands, a table on 1 leg falls over. If you get it all under one procurement department, it's easier to corrupt in the current process. But regardless of that, there you go. What do you guys think about that?
Honestly, I think they're still trying to push Rodney Ellis's new green plan or whatever. I think that's what all of this is kind of going towards. I've been seeing commercials locally about it's got that dramatic music playing in the background, right? And then they're showing the flood zones. So they're trying to instill fear in the hearts of people because they're getting ready to ask for a bunch more money from the taxpayers. That's what's getting ready to happen. So what they're and this because I think we talked about it. They just opened up this new sustainability department. They hired 4 new individuals, one of which is making more money than President Trump. And so they get this temporary money, create these permanent positions. They've got, these people making exorbitant salaries, and so you need 4 people to tell you how to do this, and the problem still won't be corrected. Then they'll have to go to the government, get more money, put it through their nonprofit slush funds, and you know how the game goes. This is it's a bid for more money and more control.
93% of the firms receiving certain contracts were campaign donors to members of the commissioner's court, underscoring political favoritism. Okay, potential favoritism.
Alleged.
All right.
Favoritism.
So we know that's happening. So what is Lena Hidalgo's answer, or should I say possibly Rodney Ellis's answer?
Right.
Moving contract oversight to the purchasing department. A reform estimated to cost $500,000 to improve accountability. How does putting it under one person, improve?
You said it cost how much?
Cost $500,000. Yeah, right. I mean, it's so. Okay, let's break it down. First thing, these departments are running amok. They're running with our funds.
Right.
Doing, it's party town in the Harris County government administration.
Right.
That's the first issue.
Absolutely.
Lena Hidalgo does not want to solve it. She wants to take that corruption, put it under one arm.
Right.
Right now, she has to go to the county commissioner's court where she has to get approval of a court.
She hates dealing with that.
Right. So she's taking this issue, blaming it on the court, which it is their fault. It's Lena Hidalgo's fault.
Right.
But she's projecting blame on the court, and then saying, her solution is to put it on the purchasing department, where most likely she has a good amount of influence over that purchasing department.
Absolutely.
You know what? These toll roads are not just an issue here in Harris County. I think it's an issue across the whole entire United States.
I agree.
You got to think, these toll roads were never instituted to be a permanent solution. Right. They were instituted only to pay for the
certain
actual
projects,
road or get people paid back from the investment they did into the roads. Now you see toll roads been here 50, 60 years, and you still have to pay that $2. And it's nothing. Nobody ever thinks about, is this $2 here, $2 there? I have to cross a toll road every time I get from my house to go to downtown Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I got this toll bill say, hey, you owe this amount of money. And I'm like, who said that I owe this money? Because I don't remember agreeing to pay for this whenever I moved to Texas. So, out of curiosity, I wrote a letter and said, hey, I would like to see a statement of accounting for the toll roads. I want to know how much the tolls have made. I want to know who or what contract that I have with the toll authority to say that I'm going to be able to agree to pay this thing. And then, magically, I don't have any more tolls.
Oh, I need to do that.
I don't have any more tolls. And so that brings me to the point. I see all of these bonds coming during the election cycle. We want to bond for this. We want to bond for that. And then you have the toll authority. And it's like, who put this administration, this toll authority over the roads in Texas? And how much are these people making? Not just for their own salary, but from many people cross these tolls.
Right.
And how much was the original cost of the actual toll? Because that seems to be a problem. These things has turned into financial slush funds that
Right.
nobody ever
Where's
thinks
the
about.
money? Like, where does
Exactly.
it go? You know they're making buku.
You have to, and you look at the traffic pattern, and
Trucks.
you know what? Anytime I've ever gotten a ticket, I say, all right, well, I want to be able to see the traffic pattern so I can understand why the police is in this area. And you have like 4 or 5 million cars a day crossing one area. Now think, if that was a toll, you got 4 or 5 million cars crossing a toll, and at $2.75 a car,
Right.
that's a lot of money
That's
in
a
one
lot
day.
of money, right?
Okay, so on a
Huh.
public highway, you're paying taxes.
Right.
They are not allowed to put a toll on that highway because they're already receiving funds from taxes. I-10 is a public highway.
It is.
It is.
And oh, by the way, it has a toll on it.
Yes, it does.
It has a fast. They jury-rigged the system,
Right.
and got that in there.
Got that loophole.
Yeah, and they paid off whoever. So in other words, on I-10, and here's what they do: on I-10, we're paying taxes for I-10,
Yeah.
and then they're charging a hefty toll for the
Right.
fast lane. But what they do is they keep widening the fast lane so that we have to go on the
You have
fast
to do
lane
it.
in order. It's
And
our
did-
government has become a rabid dog being used against us.
And
It
didn't
is.
Joe Biden allocate funds for every single state under that infrastructure bill
Yes.
to be able to take care of issues like this?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Where does the money
I
go?
mean, like, again, they got the Wuhan money, the COVID
Oh
money.
Lord.
They all got rich off of that. I spoke with someone on the inside in Fort Bend County, and he says there was so much money flying around during that time that it was impossible to track, and it had to have gone into personal accounts of these people.
It did.
So they spend that, and then immediately, right, they start in Fort Bend, they start pushing a bond because that money dried up.
Right.
They are crackheads needing the next fix.
It's that greed. It's a greed spirit. They know how to launder the money properly, And I keep saying that, you start a nonprofit, you pull that money through it somehow, some way. It crosses several hands. You got your friend that has the construction company. Okay, they didn't even barely have to bid on the job. Everybody else is bidding. Hopefully they get it because it might save their business. They have no chance because the people that's friends with those that are, in the who's who, these individuals get selected for these jobs to fix potholes that never get fixed, to fix roads that never get changed. That's what goes
Well,
on.
I always think about Rome. And, the Roman roads last to this day. They could do
Yeah, they're
that here
still
if
there.
they want to.
If they wanted to. There's no money in that.
Yep.
That's where it's all about money. Like what you were saying, you wrote them. I'm gonna do that.
You should.
I'm gonna do that because it causes them to be accountable, but they don't want to be accountable, so they just wiped off your record.
Don't have no tolls.
I also think, how we would have the floods, and the floods happen because everything's paved.
Right.
And I think that there's got to be technology out there that would make our roads porous. So in other words, the water would seep through and get to the ground underneath it. Everything's paved. The water's not getting through to the ground underneath it. That
Right.
cannot be healthy.
Right.
And I always think the Romans had so many beautiful inventions 2,000 years ago. Isn't there something where we could have a road that lasts forever and is porous? Why has that engineering marvel not happened,
I mean, they used to do brick roads at one time, but
Yeah.
there is technology. But the thing is that the having to keep fixing the road brings money.
Right.
It's about money. You got to make stuff kind of not indestructible. You have to make it to where you can come do a little patch job every now and again because that brings money. They can now ask for more money.
Imagine the inconvenience of digging up half of downtown Houston, just to repave roads that when a flood happens, once a year, it'll drain the water. It's such an inconvenience.
Yeah.
And I think that people would absolutely complain
They would.
day in and day out. You're
would.
never going to make anybody happy. So the option is if you don't like it, move. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But if you like it, stay, but move to the outside of the bowl.
Right.
Yeah.
The bowl.
It's
You're right.
It's a slippery slope on that one. I would love to see the type of technology, like when you go to Japan and they have holes in the concrete
Right.
because they set it on top of a structure that the water could drain right back into, to the
That was
ocean. I'd love to
wise.
see something, like that here or in any other state that floods. Louisiana is a perfect example, but I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Well, anyways, this is turned into an engineering marvels, popular science episode. But all right, guys, we kind of covered everything in the
Yeah,
state of
that was
Texas
good.
today. Any final thoughts that you want to close us out on?
No, I'm excited to run for District 9 against Al Green. Vote for me, AlexandriaButlerCampaign.org.
Great. Good luck. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Joe?
And also donate too. Campaigns are not
Oh,
cheap.
thank you.
You have to always, donate to the candidates and ensure that they're going to have the financial backing in order to get their advertisements up, cards, hire staff, people to knock doors, and be able to get those statements on the ballot to know the type of candidate she is. I think she's wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everybody. This is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show, and we will be back here Saturday at 10 a.m. with one more hot topic. We do have a Tuesday night episode on health and wellness coming, so that will launch this Tuesday. And that's it. Have a great week. Thank you very much.